Okay, we sent you a new Article 33 proposal. I'll be happy to walk you through it if you want. I think we really have worked off of the last proposal that we had made you on November the 3rd. I apologize for any confusion with regards to that, but it was just easier for me stylistically, or well, it was just easier. We have made changes to our proposal. We've increased the, well, let me call up the proposal here so I can. You know, obviously the firefighters hired before 1985, who I think we all agree we can count on the fingers of one hand, there's no change. The current areas of dispute remain with regards to these three other categories of employees. The ones hired between 85 and 2005, and you're going to see some common features with regards to all three groups. You know, if you're certified on the date of the contract, you have to participate in ambulance rotations to the, as a, you know, condition of employment. And, sorry, I lost my place for a moment. And, you know, failure to do that can result in discipline up to and including discharge. That doesn't prevent the chief from, you know, you had discharge. It doesn't prevent the chief from discharging, but it does give the chief an option to consider any mitigating circumstances. The chief, it only gives the chief discretion. It doesn't require him to exercise it, in other words. We don't think that that's really a substantive difference.
Can I ask you a question on
Sure.
that? Does that open up the level of discipline to appeal?
Yeah, I mean, you could appeal the discipline, but, you know, I mean, if you look at the language in the provision, I can't imagine that, quite frankly, a firefighter would win that appeal if he didn't have some really good excuse for having failed to maintain the certification.
Okay.
You know, you always, I had a firefighter a number of years ago who was having trouble maintaining certification, and they were prepared to fire that firefighter. It turned out he was dyslexic. When we got accommodations made on the test, lo and behold, he passed it. But he didn't pass it in time to have saved himself, but we did save his job in that circumstance.
Okay.
Commencing on September 1st, 2016, so again, first year into this contract, nothing would happen until September 1. But then firefighter ones who've maintained paramedic certification for 12 years, now we've increased that from 10 in our last proposal, and have participated in ambulance rotations for 12 years. So, you know, two things have to happen. They have to have been certified for at least 12 years, and they have to have participated in the ambulance rotations for 12 years. So if they spend a year getting certification or something, that might, you know, both conditions happen. So they have to participate before they can ask off, and then they could ask off. But by the same token, if they promote to firefighter 2 EMS, then they, at the end of 8 years, they can make that same request, but they have to voluntarily promote. So that would lose for the firefighter 2 EMS that chose to do that would lose rank pay, and they would also clearly lose assignment pay. So that's a heavy monetary penalty that I don't think y'all are looking at, and if you look at historically, very few have done that. But we did this very intentionally. The idea is that, you know, we're really encouraging people to promote to firefighter 2 EMS. I think that's a concern that we both share. A firefighter 1 is going to have to, you know, stay on the ambulance for 12 years after they obtain certification. The average firefighter 1 probably can promote at about 4 years in rank. And so you're looking at 12 years that a firefighter 2 would have to spend riding the ambulance as well. So that's going to be a common feature. The difference with the firefighters in category marked by section 1C is that although they don't have to maintain paramedic certification, they have to maintain EMT basic certification. But they've got the same things with regards to getting off of the ambulance. They got 12 years as a firefighter 1 or 8 years as a firefighter 2. Then paragraph D, it's sort of the same requirements, but there's a huge difference here. And that is that if you're hired after October 1st, 2014, you have to maintain paramedic certification for the duration of your employment. You don't have the opt-out that people previously have been afforded. You've got 40 people, I think, coming out of one class. You're about to start another class. So, in a department of about 350 people, that's going to be a sizable chunk immediately that are going to be subject to that requirement. So we really honestly believe that we have resolved this problem for you of not having enough people, even if you go through another drought like you've had recently where you only hired one class in 5 years. With these people coming on board, it should fix your problem. Go down really quickly to section 5, the last section. We've increased the moratorium period from 2 years to 30 months, so that's 2.5 years. And so you're going to have a moratorium that goes to September 1st, and then after that you have up to 2.5 year moratorium. So you literally, if this turns out being a 4-year contract, you literally could be in a moratorium period for the great majority, if not the totality, of the contract period. This, I think, gives you the time that you need to look at whether or not you want to consider reconfiguring. We've talked about, doing that with some sort of joint LMR committee. So we can work out all the details, because it implicates a lot of sections of the contract, obviously. There are provisions in the promotion procedure, for example, that would have to be revisited. But we really do think that this fixes your problem. We made a change that you requested with regards to the assistant EMS director. We've increased that, as per your last request, we've increased that to 150. I put a note there. I think it probably was accidental, but we were looking at the fact that supervisory paramedic pay, which also had been at 150, was dropped from your last proposal. So we're saying if you put it in for the supervisory paramedics, we'll put it in for the assistant EMS director, but we think that all ought to be treated alike. We've added a sentence to subsection 3C. You can't promote to assistant chief by virtue of your appointment to assistant EMS chief. I think I gave you the MOU, or if it wasn't an MOU, it was a letter of understanding that's always been the understanding with regards to that. And so that's really not a change to status quo. I want to say that this, article, as we proposed it, makes a lot of concessions. Okay, right now, under the current contract, a firefighter 1 has to be certified for 8 years, can get off the ambulance after 5. The firefighter 2 EMS can give up certification after 8, and there is a past practice that the chief normally will grant requests to voluntarily demote, although the chief is not doing that right now, and under the Polito decision does not have to. But here again, we're making it so that, really at a minimum, any firefighter in the firefighter 1 or 2 rank is going to spend 12 years at a minimum, and then the chief can declare a moratorium whenever staffing needs dictate that a moratorium has to be declared. We're to accommodate allowing this current class to get fully on board. We've declared a moratorium without the chief having to do anything until September 1st of this year. And we honestly believe, there's not a person on my side of the table that doesn't believe, and I hope that your fire administration will echo this, that we haven't solved the EMS problem, even if you have another drought period like you've had. And I can't imagine having worse than a drought than you've had, one class in 5 years. I think that we will have satisfied it. We will encourage rather than discourage people to maintain their certification. We will have adequate staffing. If there's an emergency, and I will say for the record that I think if you don't have enough bodies to put on the ambulance, that's pretty much an emergency. That you have to do what you have to do to get people on the box. But we think that this article allows you to do that.
So when you're talking about being able to reassign people back for emergencies, that would include staffing shortage? If we can't staff the ambulance?
I was thinking that in an emergency, in terms of you got a shift and you literally don't have a person to put on the box.
Right.
I think that's an emergency,
Okay.
yes. If it's a long-term staffing shortage, I think that that's not an emergency, but that definitely is something that allows you to declare a moratorium. Okay?
But the moratorium allows them to stop requesting and for us granting the request, but what does it do to help us alleviate that staffing shortage we have at the time? Are we still able to use those firefighters that have elected to voluntarily demote to fill those? Because that still leaves us with that empty hole.
I think, the chief declares the moratorium.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and I would assume that the chief declares the moratorium at the point in time that he still has enough people, but maybe just barely enough people to get the coverage that, the department needs. And so it shouldn't get to that. But if because of, retirements, whatever, it becomes a true emergency situation, hey, even with a moratorium, I still literally do not have enough bodies to get into the ambulance, then at that point, I think it becomes an emergency. Okay?
Okay.
So, yeah, and I will tell you that there's nobody on this side of the table, and I don't think anybody in the fire department that doesn't want to make sure that you have enough people. And, if you look at Section 5, it literally says, the parties understand and agree that the fire department must be able to adequately staff its ambulances at all times. Okay? I mean, that's the statement of intent there. And, a 30-month moratorium is 2.5 years. And during that time, we all know that the chief has to do what the chief has to do to manage the department. But we also know that when you've got, if you're doing your planning right and you see these problems coming up, there's dialogue going on, should be. And we all know that this problem is coming up and we're all looking for ways to address it. And, at the end of the day, if we can't come up with something and it becomes an emergency, the chief always has the ability, I think, to pull anybody. People that have exercise rights previously, people that haven't. I think that that's the way the proposal clearly reads. So, I don't see that there's a way that you will get into a box that's as bad as, much less worse than, the box you've been in these past several years. Really it was the fact that you were in a box so bad, this is my understanding, that required the chief to declare a moratorium in the first place. And it's also my understanding, and you can correct me if we're wrong, that even then the chief didn't see that it was going to have to be a very long moratorium. Certainly it didn't appear that way, but 2.5 years, that's a long time.
Okay. I have a general question with regard to generally Section B and Section C, those two categories. On those two categories, I guess the biggest difference between those categories is if you drop your paramedic certification, the earlier category doesn't have to maintain any kind of EMT certification, but the second category, the latter category, has to maintain their EMTB or higher. Is that correct?
That's right.
The only difference?
That's really the only difference,
Okay.
and that's just a historical difference.
And then,
it's grown up over time.
And then in addition to that, on both those categories then, currently firefighter ones have the ability to opt out of the ambulance duty, and currently firefighter twos don't contractually. The chief could always be more generous, and if you were able to, with regard to staffing, allow firefighter twos to opt out of the ambulance. But because of the situation we're in now, like you said, he's not able to do that. What you're asking in this proposal now is to now leave this paramedic certification the same, that they can drop it in 8 years if they need to, or if they want to. And you're giving the firefighter ones the ability to opt out of the ambulance, just raising the number of years by, currently it's 8 years.
Actually, that's not true. Currently, I think it's 5.
Okay, I need to look at the settlement agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pursuant to the settlement agreement.
I was getting ready to look at the, yeah. He's saying it's 8.
It's 8, yeah,
So-
I think pursuant to the settlement agreement, it's 8 years. So you have moved that up to 12, which is 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But then in addition to that, you're actually adding an opt-out for firefighter 2 EMS that currently does not exist. And that would be after, is that?
8.
That's after 8 years.
That's 8 years in addition to whatever time they spent riding the ambulance as a firefighter 1.
8 years
So-
in rank.
So 8 years in rank, and then another probably on average 4 years as a firefighter 1. So we're looking at 12 years.
Okay, so you're giving
Okay.
us 4 more years on a firefighter 1, but now you're limiting firefighter 2 to 12 years. Based
Well-
on your average, is that right?
Based on the average, limiting well, that's when firefighter 2s can request to voluntarily demote. But I want to point out to you, because I think this keeps getting overlooked, historically, very, very few persons have opted out.
Okay.
And I expect that historical trend to continue because, some will promote and they'll get out that way. Some will just be willing to stay firefighter 2 EMS indefinitely, and we have some in that category. And a very small handful will request to voluntarily demote. But it is a very small number. I think your administration will back us up on this. Very few people do that because they can't afford to lose the money. And
And the reason for including that in there is as a, I guess, as kind of a safety net to catch people who need to get out of the ambulance?
that's
or-
right.
or-
That's right. And also, y'all have a problem right now getting people to take the firefighter 2 EMS test. We're trying to incentivize them. If the Polito agreement is the status quo and we don't change that, that disincentive is going to continue. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Here, average firefighter promotes after about 4 years. Some can promote quicker. I mean, you're talking about changing the requirements for taking the test to allow people even with less than 2 years experience to take. But this way, they're looking at it, well, I might as well promote because I'm going to spend the same number of years on the box anyway. That's the reason we go at 12 at the one level and 8 at the 2 level.
What
is
about,
everybody's looking at 12 years.
what about what we, the concept that we propose with regard to firefighter 1s and firefighter 2s, where we switch the Polito and the settlement agreement, where we have the firefighter 1s that will ride the ambulance and may request to get off the ambulance, but at the discretion of the chief, and then moving that right to opt out of the ambulance to firefighter 2 EMS. That really greatly incentivizes promoting up to firefighter 2 EMS, because now you have the ability to say, hey, after this number of years in rank, and it actually incentivizes promotion much earlier, as soon as you can, to promote up to a firefighter 2 EMS level, to elect instead of requesting, but actually to elect out.
At some point, Roxy, if 12 years as a firefighter 1 doesn't do it, adding more years to that firefighter 1 requirement just becomes punitive. And it just does. We have gone around and round about this, and if the goal is to make sure that you have enough people to ride the ambulance at all times, this proposal does that. You're saying 8 years, but you're overlooking
Right, 8 years
that
in
there's a
rank.
year on the front of it where nobody's going to do anything, and then there's up to 2.5 years on the end of it where you can prevent people from opting off. And so, you know, that's specifically to meet your staffing needs, no other reason. And what it does is, it greatly increases the amount of time, regardless of the fact that you won Polito. Every firefighter in this department thought, before that Polito decision, that he or she had a right to get to voluntarily demote after 8 years. And they feel, you know, that something got taken from them with the Polito decision. Because, you know, keep in mind that what the arbitrator didn't say, no, there's not a past practice. The arbitrator said the opposite. There is a past practice. The arbitrator said there's just a contract language that's more specific that trumps the past practice, so you still lose. But something was taken from them. A past practice that had always been exercised in the past in favor of the firefighter was taken from them.
Well,
We're trying to get that back, but at the same time realizing that we're going to have to increase the amount of time you can keep the firefighter once on the box. We're going to have to give you a moratorium so that you can make sure you can always staff it, that when there's an emergency, all bets are off. We've incorporated all of that into our proposal, and that, I think, more than meets the administration's needs. And, you know, I mean, if you want to get the chief or the assistant chief or anybody here to tell us how this doesn't work, you know, we'll look at it again. But I have really, I mean, I just have to be honest with you.
Well,
I've really pushed this team as hard as I can. I don't think we can give you a better proposal than the proposal we're making today. I feel quite confident that we cannot. And so what I'm asking you to do is look at this proposal, tell us whether or not you can accept it, and we can get on to the other stuff. If you can't, then I'm inviting you to make a last best offer and let us decide whether or not we've got enough to take to the membership for a vote, or whether we need to go through impasse procedures.
okay, well, we're definitely gonna look through and go through each aspect of this proposal. I'd like to map it out and see exactly what it says. I know we're going over generalities, but, you know, you said a couple of things that I want to clarify. You know, you said that if we extended the time that a firefighter one were to ride the ambulance, it would be punitive to them.
Beyond 12 years.
Beyond 12 years. I think it, you know, when we look at what being a firefighter is and what it encompasses, we look at the response calls. We have 80% of those response calls being EMS calls that require an ambulance to be there, as well as a fire truck. So that is part of the duties, the key duties that a firefighter has to serve in today's department. Also, you know, I know that the firefighters feel that something was taken from them, but that contract language was negotiated, and that was set in stone. And you say that there may have been a past practice. It may have been a past practice without that contract language, but the fact is that there was contract language there, so there was not a past practice, and that's why we took it to arbitration, because the city felt that before then, that when the city was trying to be generous and be able to rotate the firefighters off the ambulance, that what was taken from the city were management rights. And so, you know, there has to be a give and take there. If they feel something was taken from them, it was, you know, something had been taken from the city as well. So what we're trying to do is remedy that situation. We don't want to punish anybody. We don't want to, you know, collective bargaining by its own nature is a give and take negotiation. And that's what we're trying to find the medium to which benefits both the firefighters as well as the city. And we will take your proposal and look at it, and I think I've mentioned this to you before. I think we have worked very hard on our proposals and the last ones that we have given to you, and I had pushed my team to its limit, and I was at my authority at that time. And so we'll look at this. If we can work with it, we will. If we can't work with it, then we will probably work on our last best final offer and present that to you. So, but in all honesty, I have to go and pick through this proposal first and sit with my team and sit with the people that this directly affects, so that we can completely understand this and see where we can move from here. Okay.
Let me just say this, you know, and I realize I'm bargaining here with you now. Everything's on tape.
Right.
So I want to say this once, and I'm talking to your city manager and your city council. And I want to go that, why do people become firefighters? They become firefighters because they want to be firefighters. 99, if you talk to all the firefighters, I bet 99% of them will tell you it's the firefighting aspect of the job that attracted them to the job. And you can't look simply at numbers of calls and say, well, that's the job of a firefighter. I mean, if you want to look at just some numbers of accidents, probably more firefighters get hurt doing EMS calls, lifting heavy patients onto a stretcher or something like that. But where lives are lost, where injuries are severe, where life is on the line, and I'm talking about the firefighter's life, that happens in the firefighting aspect of the job. When we had heavy rains in Austin recently, in one night, 200 rescue calls were made, some with helicopters, some with boats, some with people forming human chains to get to people who were stranded. I mean, you cannot simply look at the numbers. We're giving you a proposal here that has the firefighters riding on the ambulance for more than half of their careers in general. At the same time, we're giving you a proposal that they're always going to be doing emergency medical work all throughout their careers, whether it's off the fire truck. And when you look at that 80% of the calls, the fire trucks are responding, usually getting there first to most of those calls. We're not talking about people not doing certain aspects of their job. We're talking about people that we're talking about creating outs for people that are at the end of their tether. And historically in this city, it has been very few. So what we're really dealing with is that situation to help people, and we are compromising. I mean, right now you've got a system where firefighter ones can get out pretty quickly and easily, and firefighter 2 EMSs can't get out at all, as you put it, without giving up certification. So the current system, promotes decertification and promotes people not promoting. Two things you're trying to conquer. And I'm telling you that our proposal addresses those needs specifically. The feeling on your side is it just doesn't do it enough. But what I would ask you to do, because as you said, negotiation is compromise, is to look at whether you want to hold out for your solution, which we can't accept, and then there is no compromise, and you've got the worst system imaginable, which is the one you've got right now. And that's not going to work for you either. And, so we're trying to address that problem and to help you guys with that in a way that gives our members the rights that they really need, and they feel this with all their heart and soul, and that we can get passed by our membership. But if the idea is that we're looking for a way to get out of doing a part of our job, I really want to go as hard as I can against that, because that is just not true. These firefighters risk their lives, and several of them have been injured severely in this department in the last couple of years fighting fires. And they want to do that job for the citizens. If you look at the number that have given up paramedic certification, almost none. If you look at the number that have asked to voluntarily demote, almost none. I mean, we've got firefighters that have ridden on the box a long time and plan to ride a long time longer. All we're dealing with here is a problem that was caused because we weren't able, for reasons we don't need to go into, we weren't able to hire in 4 out of 5 years. And so we just didn't have enough bodies to do any of the jobs in the fire department, much less the EMS job. But despite all of the problems, your EMS department is one of the highest rated in the country. One of the highest rated in the country. They have a saving rate that is just dramatically better than the average in Texas and the average in the nation. They do a superb job, and the idea that they want to run from that is just not true. And so I would urge the manager and the council not to view it that way. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is that we don't have enough bodies to throw at all the problems, and people are exhausted. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, but that's the problem we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a problem of, gosh, these guys just don't want to do their job, because I can assure you that's not true. So I'll get that off my soapbox. And but I believe with all my heart that we've given you a proposal that really addresses and meets the city's needs. And I would be very surprised if your fire administration felt differently about that.
Okay, we'll go through it and, we'll see what we can work with on your proposal. Okay?
Very good, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Are we meeting today?
Yeah, do we need to, I mean, I'm assuming that you're looking at it's not gonna allow you to get back to us today.
Yeah, I don't have the time to get it done, get back today, so.
Okay. Okay,
So this will, yeah, we won't, I have to go back to the drawing board and go look through this, and it's gonna take me a lot longer than the time that we have this afternoon.
okay, and as I've told you before, I'm willing to talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime. We very much want a bargain agreement, but we're just, we're doing everything we can to get there, but
Okay.
at the end of the day, we gotta meet in the middle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.